SC Media is proud to present this month's CISO Stories program, hosted by yours truly, Jessica Hoffman. This is a show where CISOs share tales from the trenches and unpack leadership lessons learned along the way. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. The Cyber Risk Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, please visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CRC. Here we go. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of CISO Stories Podcast. You're back with me, yours truly, Jess Hoffman, as your host. Super excited for our guest today, all the way from Tokyo, or Tokyo Drift, as the producer said, Lisa Landau. What's up, girl? How you doing?
How you doing, Jessica? Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yes, well, you're my first woman guest, which I'm really excited about, we're doing a lot of great stuff in the space, and you being all the way in Tokyo, I'm not sure if this is our first international guest, but I'm going to say it is. So we want to hear all about Tokyo and what that means from an executive level and all that good stuff. So this month's theme is tool selection. So Lisa, you and I talked a couple weeks ago about your thoughts on tool selection, which I thought were very interesting, especially with you being in a different country. Being in Japan, and you said you also work in Europe and with American companies. So, that perspective on how worldwide different countries take their perspective on how they're implementing and integrating tool selections when they roll out new or if they wait and so forth. So we're going to talk about all those things too. I want you, can you give us a little background? How you get to Tokyo? You originally from Israel? What happened there? How'd you get there?
Yeah, so I'll do a quick self intro because this is my least favorite part, talking about myself. There are other things I prefer to talk about, but yeah, I do have a bit of a bit of a unique career path, or just life path, perhaps. I have been in the high growth startup space for 16 years. I am originally from Israel. I do have some military intelligence background from back in the day. I studied in Japan. I did a few some degrees in university in international relations and Southeast Asia, and I majored in Japan. And I first ended up in Japan as part of my master's. And then after I left the academic world and I started in a startup, they leveraged my Asian experience. So I was working globally, but then that led me to Asia. Because that was a much needed experience. And so I've been in Tokyo for 11 years now, but I have been holding global roles, and woman to woman, it hasn't been easy, and especially in a country like Japan, which is very conservative and very old-fashioned in that sense. You don't have a lot of women in the workspace, and especially you don't have a lot of women in the managerial and the executive space. That's probably a conversation for another day, if you'd like to have it. But yeah, there were a lot of ceilings and a lot of glass to break through. So I've been here for 11 years. I've been in global roles. I've spent the past decade in cybersecurity, under a cybersecurity vendor, building out cybersecurity services, dealing with customers a lot, and which ultimately led me to co-founding ThreatLight, which is now my startup that I'm the CEO of. We're a global startup. I'm in Tokyo. My co-founder is in the UK. We're a US-based company, so we just like to break the template all the way through. We don't like, we like to push the envelope as much as we can, and just find the strengths in everything and try to work towards those and not see the weaknesses and the challenges that other people see. ThreatLight is a hybrid service first based on technology. We're developing our own platform. We specialize in critical asset protection and incident response, which I think was your topic last month. So we can kind of segue. into those. But yeah, that's what I do, and tool selection has been a part of my life in the various decision making processes I had to make, or working with customers who were selecting a tool or a vendor. So have a bit of a glimpse into the American, European, Asian, Japanese. So happy to talk about it, whatever you'd like to know.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that. Very interesting background, colorful, and you being in a different part of the world and bringing that unique perspective to us here in the States. Well, I guess we're worldwide. Shout out to everybody not in the U.S.
Woohoo.
listening. Um,
Shout out to everyone who's awake. I'm trying to
yes,
make up for my boring wall with my colorful background.
we're don't worry about your wall. You're colorful enough, okay? So,
Yeah.
yeah, great segue. Thank you for all that. So, you mentioned before, as far as Americans or American companies, we're running for that innovation. We're running for that new tech and the new tools, which some would say, that's awesome. We're, a pillar. We're an example of what that looks like in our community, in our world when it comes to tech. I know Israel has a lot of great products too. So, certainly we're not alone in that. But just as far as American companies or American thoughts would be to move forward and run and we got to do this AI. I'm just going to pick on AI. We got to put this AI chatbot in right now. We got to do this AI right now versus Japan or maybe other areas, other countries in the world are more risk adverse. Can you talk a little bit about your experience where you have seen that difference to where maybe not just America, but other countries that are very much like running forward full speed. We got to be the first. We got to be the best versus some other countries that are like, okay, I'm going to take a seat back and let everybody else mess up before I go forward with this.
Sure. Yeah, we can talk about the differences, and I think there are a lot of similarities in the decision maker or in the customer persona or the culture of tool selection across different disciplines, in which so cybersecurity wouldn't be much different. But when it comes to cybersecurity, there are probably a few more factors that work into the decision making. Obviously, it's more urgent, it's more relevant, it's more, you got to be more careful about certain things. But the buyer persona doesn't change, or the decision making persona doesn't wouldn't make much of a difference. They just need to think. I guess the incident trends or the attack trends would affect how quickly or how slowly they would be able to make decisions, or how quickly or slowly budgets would become available that otherwise would not. With the U.S., like you said, and I'm very much generalizing. We understand that we're putting all the companies, all the organizations, all of them into one bucket and just calling them US, calling them Europe, calling them Japan. We understand that it's not how it works, but for the sake of, building a pattern, it is probably rather correct. So like you said, US does tend to be an innovator or like a pioneer, and it's great. Somebody should be the first adopter. Somebody should take a chance on all these technologies. The US also being the big market with the larger companies that it is, they have more power, more security teams that are in house, and so there's still the agencies and the service providers, but there's also more in-house personnel that could potentially adopt these tools, which would pose a challenge in some other countries. It's just not as advanced, not as developed. So there's more security teams in house that have can enjoy adopting the new tools. US is, although pioneering, it is very compliance driven. It is very compliance driven. It's also, I think, very much, forgive me, they like the trend of the frameworks. There, you got to have the NIST, you got to have the MITRE, and I think sometimes, and sometimes it's compliance driven, and you need to do that. But then you might, while spending all your time mapping everything to MITRE, you might lose sight of what is actually important for your incident, to prevent an incident or to resolve an incident. US is also very much, when they select tools, very much looking at how would this reduce the effort and the workload on my team again, because they have in-house teams, but nobody has enough people. There's a massive skill gap all across the world. So the tools, at least like in the mind of the buyer, the tools are there to make things more efficient for them. Europe is while US looks at the complex threat landscape, so they're looking a little bit forward. I'm going to do threat intel. I'm going to do predictive. I'm going to do this. Europe is a little more risk driven. I need to get my assets in order. I need to have my reports. I need to have all these things, and of course, privacy. GDPR is something we all know. So it is an aspect of compliance. Of course, compliance is very important, but very very stringent privacy rules, and that leads a lot of the decisions and a lot of things they do. And then we go to Japan, which is very much risk averse, which is like you said, hey, let the Americans mess up. Tell us what's, and I've literally had this conversation with people that sounded exactly like that. Tell us what's happening in America. Tell us what's new. Oh no, let somebody else. Have they done it? Have they done it there? Has it succeeded there? Have they done it here? Did it succeed here? Did somebody else take a chance on them first? Okay, maybe. So yeah. So when it comes to Japan, it's very much like let us go second. Let's make sure somebody's done it and it didn't like blow up in their faces. Japan is also very much like they patch they will run on the oldest operating system until the Microsoft will walk into their office and say it's dead, it's in the garbage. Upgrade. Yeah. So Japan is very much into long term, and it's about relationship. It's about quality and how bulletproof things are. So they will go with a vendor that has good customer support, good customer service, that they can rely on. That they will buy long term. They don't hop tools. So they will take longer to make a decision, but there is a likelihood that they will also stick with the vendor longer because it needs to be integrated. What is common between everybody is at the end of the day, they are looking for something that would integrate into what they have more seamlessly. No, if it takes a lot of effort to adopt a tool, nobody likes that, and that would make it very very uncomfortable. So the more seamlessly you can integrate, the better it would be. I personally think that there are pros and cons in how different countries do it, and I think if they adapted a little bit from each other, then the overall they could have a much stronger program and a much better stack if they learn from each other a little bit.
Wow. So you just said a whole lot there, a whole lot of gems
Sorry.
dropped. No, I love it. I love it. Overall, I think overarching, you're explaining the risk tolerance pretty much, and that's how all organizations run, regardless of where they are, right? What risk are they willing to accept? But you touched on a few things that I just wanted to point out as far as the differences that you've seen, and that's the differences in budget, difference in compliance requirements, difference in team setup, which I thought was interesting. You mentioned that a lot of American-based companies have in-house, and that's not so much the case outside of America or other countries. So I thought that was really interesting. You mentioned relationships, especially with Japan. You emphasized it there, which I'm a big fan of that as well. Tool hopping or vendor hopping or professional service company hopping, all that takes time, especially coming from the public service perspective. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of red tape and dotted lines you have to go through. So it's not very easy to move around. And obviously, when you start integrating a tool and it has access to all your data and it's installed with all your endpoints, it's very difficult to back out. So I thought that was really a good emphasis on the importance of relationships and building that and beforehand, right? And then the last thing you mentioned specifically to Japan was the level of effort with integration. I think we can all agree to that. What is the least amount of effort that we can implement this tool after we've already done our due diligence, after we already know we have the budget, after we know that we can be in compliance, after we know we have the team to support it, whether it's in-house or external. So those were all great points. And to think about the differences across the world. Let's circle back. Well, first of all, let me just tell you, don't come out compliance. You know, I'm an auditor. Okay. We love our NIST and our MITRE here in the States.
Yeah, you do.
We love it. All right. I'm a NIST fan, you know, go NIST. We're a NIST shop.
We like NIST too.
Okay. All right. Okay. You know, I was just making sure don't come for our NIST. Um,
No.
GDPR, obviously, that was very big too when it first rolled out. As far as from privacy, California has been incorporating privacy laws for longer than any other states, but that's something across the United States. We're implementing privacy laws per state, so it's a little uh, it's not necessarily centralized how it's being implemented across the states, but you know we do have the overarching. A lot of folks or a lot of companies and states, I should say, pull from GDPR. So I wanted to talk about that for a second too. Working with other countries in Europe, I've been to Germany quite a few times, and they take privacy very, very, very seriously on the street. You can't even take a selfie with somebody behind you without their permission, type of deal. So I can imagine when we're talking about the companies there, this GDPR, I mean, they take it very, very seriously how their data is being secured and from a confidentiality integrity perspective. Could you talk a little bit about some of the companies maybe you worked with that the privacy was more, the stringency there with the privacy and maybe following the GDPR, and how you've seen that different maybe when you're working with companies in the US or other areas that aren't required to implement GDPR or
You
just
think the
privacy in
basically
general?
of the things I'm not allowed to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's okay. We don't want you to get in trouble.
No,
Okay.
I think though I think as a global company, as a global vendor ourselves, vendor however you want to call it, if we want to work globally, it is our responsibility to put the standards, to set the bar of the standard as high as possible for each, each one. For example, when it comes to privacy, we're going to set GDPR as what we look at when we deal with anyone, just like with the Japanese meticulous quality, that's going to be our standard for anyone, regardless of where they are. So we're just going to adopt the highest possible standards, and then we're definitely not doing anything wrong to anyone. So that would be the best thing. I think also, like speaking of GDPR, there's a new policy coming out that's coming into effect next year that is all of us need to learn up on. It's I do know the letters, it's like DORA, but I don't know if you call it Dora or DORA. Yeah. Yeah, it just reminds me of a kid's cartoon. So yeah, we need to learn all of these because you have to be very, very aware. And when you deal with the European companies, and some companies take GDPR very seriously, it's not everybody needs to be compliant, but some people are almost taking it over, like taking advantage of it. It would be also advisable to have a good legal team that would teach you upfront about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, because GDPR is not always, like a lot of things in the legal practice, they're not always working according to a regular human logic. So what you might assume as a human being because of what you're used to that is normal and is okay might turn out to be not okay under GDPR. So I've just had to basically go and read it during various cases with different customers, or customer requests to disclose information about an employee, for example. I had to go and do a lot of checkups with it, read a lot on GDPR, involve our compliance lawyers to see whether the request was legitimate or not. So it makes you have to go outside your comfort zone and discipline to make sure you're okay. Yeah.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
That's what compliance and regulation is for, right? To make sure that you're doing the right thing, but usually it pushes you out of the comfort zone. So let's sorry, I just threw you that softball, that curveball there. You came at us with the NIST, so I was like, all right, let me check what she knows. Nah, just playing, girl.
Yeah, I do.
So
I do really like NIST. Actually, one of my service portfolios that I was building, purposely aligned it to NIST because I thought it would resonate with people, and I do really like how the framework. It is very logical. Its steps are very logical, and I do like it. I wasn't coming at auditors and compliance. I think a lot of the time compliance is being put in place, and it really helps cybersecurity professionals and decision like CIOs or CISOs that otherwise they find it very difficult to justify their needs to their C-suite, and compliance in some way makes it easier for them because, well, now you have to budget it for me, or now you have to allow it for me. What I do not like about it, and this has nothing to do with compliance or auditors, what I don't like is when security professionals know that they need to be compliant and they would go for the cheapest possible thing in order to tick a box, and they don't actually care about the security reasoning behind it. And I've seen it more times than I'd like, when people are like, well, we'll just get the cheapest vendor, get me a checkbox. I need to get my HIPAA. I need to get my, SOC 2 renewed. So that is what I don't like, is when they lose sight of
Yes.
what stands behind it.
And you're absolutely right. Compliance, but one of my favorite hashtag compliance is not equal security. And there's a difference between checkbox and actually implementing security controls that reduce your risk. And you reminded me, Jen Easterly recently said, she's been saying this, but at the MWise, about we need to focus more on these software vendors not putting out faulty code, because the compliance checks that they're doing, the audits that they're doing, don't always reveal, or maybe don't always resolve their vulnerabilities, and they look to the customers to do that. So we're putting more onus on the customers, who may or may not have the budget, they may not have the correct team, they may not understand compliance requirements, etc. So if we could put more onus on the vendors themselves to put out tools that are are as secure as they can possibly be, right? We know that there's 0 days. We know that the adversaries are out there 9 to 5 Eastern Standard Time trying to break into us, right? If there's a will, there's a way. But at the same time, there certainly are ways that these vendors could do better with ensuring that there aren't already vulnerabilities and gaps within the tools that they're selling before they advertise and sell to their clients, making them the onus of those. So, I think that's a good point, which you just said, making sure that we're holding everybody accountable, especially in our tool selection. But it is harder to know, because they could show us a SOC report, they could show us a HIPAA assessment, they could show us a GDPR report, and we kind of just got to take it for face value, right? And as an auditor, I like to say that we, trust but verify. We need to trust, but we can't
Absolutely.
necessarily verify. I'm not going to go in and do another assessment, right? So that's why it's just that's a whole nother talk too. Like, how are we
Yeah.
going to hold our
That's how we're
vendors
going to red
accountable?
team them.
Yeah, well, I knew you were coming for auditors and compliance, but that
I
was
was
a good
not.
segue.
I was
That's a good
not, but I
segue.
was actually, yeah. I think, like ourselves too. We, as people who are building, who are offering security services or security solutions with a platform, we're building our platform with secure by design first. And I think people need to remind themselves that not only scalable architecture, not only being cost effective, not only that, you also need to be secure, because you're potentially putting yourself and all your customers at risk. So this needs to be an integrity issue and a business decision, I guess.
I love that. Yes, bake security in and not on. Absolutely. So I know we're coming at the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you. You mentioned when we met during our prep that there's not one magic tool out there. One size fits all. So could you just maybe give us an example of where you've been working with clients and provided that advice or that leadership where you saw that it was really important to emphasize that, because we certainly don't want to implement one tool that does all the things, right? Because what happens when that tool is no longer available? So yeah, can we talk a little bit about what you meant when you said not one magic tool exists?
Well, tooling in general, I think, needs to be a balancing act. And it's a balancing act between different tools, but also between tools and people, which is why we as a company chose the hybrid approach, because we know we're in a very specialized space, and AI can help things a lot. It can speed things up, but it can't replace human expert decision. There are a lot of things that go into decision making. We absolutely don't have time right now to go into all of that. But when CISOs, CIOs, or other people make decisions about introducing a new tool, they need to look at their overarching strategy and beyond efficiency, budget, integration. Do I have the people? Do I have the know-how in the company to support that tool? Because if I don't, I probably do need to outsource it to a service provider or found an augmenter. So where one tool does not fit all, I'm just trying to do this on one breath. But I think there's a massive difference between enterprise and SMBs, and their maturity levels and the way they are equipped to realize the value and derive the value from a tool. If it's built as a one, you're gonna lose it. You're gonna lose the efficiency. You're gonna lose the value of the tool. So you need to understand who you're targeting and their ability to make the most out of this tool. And hopefully the decision makers, they have their list of what they're looking for and how they're assessing in order to make the right decision.
I love that. Thank you, Lisa. I always like to ask my guests this question. So, Lisa, what would you tell your 18-year-old self as far as your career pathway, personal? What advice would you give 18-year-old Lisa?
Oh, wow. You should have given me more time to think about it. The 18-year-old me had no idea, but it did. But I did have those. I think I dared to have those dreams. I just thought they were going to be dreams and not reality. So I think going back, I would tell myself to have more confidence and to dare more. Something that took me decades to develop, but we got there.
I love that. No, I don't give prep for that. I want the candid, raw response. So that was beautiful. Dare more. I love that. I might have to I'm going to steal that. Everybody out there, dare more. Hashtag dare more. How can we find you? How can the listeners find you, Lisa?
Easy to. I'm in Tokyo.
Besides that, what's your socials?
On LinkedIn as Lisa Landau. You can email me, lisa@threatlight.com. You can go to our page on LinkedIn, which is Threatlight. It's very, yeah. So it basically whatever, just look for Threatlight and you will see us. We also have a cool little video on YouTube and on LinkedIn. Please watch. It's a pride and joy. Yes, and we also have our, I might send you one. We also provide not only incident response, but emotional support animals.
Love it.
Company with purple wing and helmet as its logo. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lisa. This has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I hope you get some good rest. Thanks for hanging out with us at midnight, Tokyo. We really appreciate your time, and anything we can do for you in the future, please let us know.
Thank you so much. I'll be happy to come back again. It was great speaking to you, and I hope the listeners found any of my, little bits helpful in any way. But yeah, pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, keep breaking them ceilings. Let's go.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Until next time, check us out next week with a new special guest, and be well. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode. Thanks for joining.